Hey, and welcome to a slightly spur-of-the-moment impromptu video because I bought this little piece of cool, funky retro tech. Now, I'm not going to start collecting calculators because retro PCs are still my thing, but the reason why I bought this was because I just saw it, and it's the very, very same model calculator that my parents gave me when I went to secondary school in 1976, and it's the box that gave it away. Brought all these crazy memories flooding back to me, so I thought, it's still a cool bit of tech, it's still kind of a computer, so I might as well make a quick video about it. So these were early days for the calculator, but before the calculator you used one of these things, and we still had to use them in tandem with calculators when I first went to school. It's called a slide rule for anybody who's not old enough to remember. So this is kind of like a ruler, but it's got a sliding section in the middle and a whole variety of calibrated scales that you move cursors and sliders against, and you can use these to make some pretty complex calculations. So I thought, shit, I've got the calculator, I've just got to get one of these things, now at my ripe old age, and now that I've got a bit of patience, I might actually be able to make it work in some way. So these things have quite an interesting history. It's been around for a long time. It's the sort of 1600s, early 1600s that slide rules first came into being in various guises, but this modern kind that we have here didn't really come into being until the mid-1800s, and it was invented by a French artillery lieutenant, which kind of makes sense because artillerymen would have had to do things like calculate trajectories and things like that, and also that was just before the kind of boom in engineering that took place, and they sort of came into slightly wider use then, but I don't think, from what I've read, that they ever really took off as a mainstream calculating device. So as a result of all of that industrialization in the 1900s, there were various specialists, sort of versions of these. I used to work at an airport, and pilots used to carry a manual aviation computer along with a whole stack of paper, which is all on an iPad now. But back then they had a sort of aviation computer, which is kind of based on the same principles. There are also specialist ones for banking, engineering, and all sorts of other sort of specialist disciplines where they needed specialist scales on their rules. Okay, so all of the scales on here are labelled A, B, C and D from top to bottom. The centre slider has scales B and C on it, and above it is A and below it is D. So we're going to slide the number 1 cursor over to 2, so that's the number 1 cursor on the C scale over to 2 on the D scale, which is the bottom one, and then the slider will bring down the rule and line that up with number 3 on the C scale. So we've got the cursor of the C scale set to 2 on the D scale, so that's the 2 of our 2 times 3, and then we move the slider down to 3 on the C scale, which is the 3 of the 2 times 3, and then immediately below that you can see the answer, number 6. Simple? Maybe. I experienced a lot of this when I was doing the slide rule back in the day, I remember that much, and when I was refamiliarising myself with it, not that I can remember anything, I experienced even more of this. So I'm not going to bore you with too many more examples. In fact, I'm only going to bore you with one more example, a very quick one. We're going to work out the square of 4. And for that, all you do is you keep the cursor ones aligned on the left-hand side, and you slide the slider along to the number 4 on the D scale. And then if you look at the top on the A scale, the scale's not even, but there's a count of 1 to 10. And our cursor falls between 10 and 20, and if you count along there, you come to 16. So the square of 4 is indeed 16. Even more simple. So that's the slide rule. I never thought I'd be looking at one of those again, but then I was inspired when I bought that calculator to go even further back into my mathematical past. So, valuable scientific instrument or medieval torture device, you decide. I know what I think. Yeah, it was quite harsh making a poor little kid of that age deal with one of those things. So we're all very, very pleased when the calculator came along. And when I first saw mine, because of the sort of box, and it looks like vaguely military, I thought it was some kind of toy when my parents handed it me. I thought it was some kind of accessory for my playing war outside in the streets or whatever. Because at this time, everybody was into war, because it was the height of the Cold War, and everybody knew everything about Russian military hardware and what have you. Become very topical again all of a sudden, unfortunately. Anyway, so This is a Commodore Minuteman. And Minuteman was a long-running naming convention that they used right from the beginning of their manufacture of calculators. I think they started in about 1971. There's Minuteman, went through various series until we got to this one, which is a 796M. So it's a 7 series, which was the one second to the last. There was an 8 series that followed. And it used a Commodore 3D98 integrated circuit to do all of its crazy calculations and what have you, and it had an LED display which is rather funky. LED bubble, I think it's called, because they're in kind of lenses, each individual character, and they moved on to cheaper solutions for the display after this, so this has the privilege of being one of the last LED display calculators from Commodore. It has a very funky aesthetic, the same kind of beige that you get on like the C64 and the Amiga, so it's quite a funky little thing. And it's got everything in there. All the paperwork. So we've got the guarantee, or guarantee in German, or guarantee en français, and it's got a stamp from Boots the Chemist, which is a pharmacy chain here in the UK, one that survived the internet boom and still continues to trade today, I might add. Then we've got some other documentation. We've got an owner's manual, which is quite cool, and inside there's basically a lot of instructions on how to perform the various mathematical functions that the calculator can deal with, and also a little bit on the battery and a power supply. It takes an external power supply, which you wouldn't have thought for such a small thing. There's a bit of information on the back, various bits, types of battery you need, the serial number, the model number, and instructions on how to get into it to put a battery in, so I guess we should go ahead and do that right now. Already seems to be turned on, so there we go, and there's that cool red LED. I love that kind of aesthetic. It's a shame that there's no backlit keyboard, because then you could really use it in the dark. It's a very stripped down calculator. It's about as basic as it could get. There's no scientific functions or anything here, just your essentials. Now, I do remember one of the proofs of whether a calculator was worth its weight or not was to see how many obscene words you could write using the display. So I can only remember one, shit, and it doesn't work very well in this, unfortunately, because the minus sign is a bit too far away from the previous character, whereas I know that in some of the later models, such as this Texas Instruments one, which I also had as we moved on into higher classes and needed scientific functionality, I had one of these, and this wrote shit rather well, but unfortunately this one is just a bit too basic for that. So that pretty much wraps it up for this video. I know it was a bit off-ball, but it's a beautiful little thing, this Commodore calculator. It can't play Doom though, so crap. What use is it? It'll probably just become a collector's item. It'll sit there. It'll just remind me of past times. And as for the slide rule, that sure as hell can't play Doom. And that'll go back in its box, and I'll probably never look at that again. But just a curiosity, I thought I'd get one. Just a last play with one alongside the calculator that I had at the same time. And a quick comparison. And I remember the pain of using it, and will never ever go back to experience any more of that. So in the meantime, I'd rather be playing with one of these, and in the next video, indeed, that's exactly what we'll be doing in some form. In the next few days, I'll be putting out something else to do with the PCs again. So I hope you enjoyed watching this for what it was, and if you did, it'd be great if you consider giving me a thumbs up or subscribing or leaving a comment below. Thanks very much for watching. Bye.